Welcome to Sky Team's People First with Morag Barrett.
Welcome to this week's episode of People First. My guest this week is Lee Itzhaki, who has more than 25 years in the high-tech industry. Lee has become a seasoned expert in product management and business development, having worked with both large and small companies on software and hardware products. In recent years, Lee's interests have gravitated towards employee engagement, retention, and productivity. And most recently, Lee founded HeyLoops, a groundbreaking platform designed to help people forge stronger workplace relationships, ultimately transforming the way we connect and collaborate. Words after my own heart, Lee, welcome to People First.
Thank you, Morag. Glad to be here, especially after the illness delays that you and I have both had.
Yes. Lee and I have been playing professional Olympic level rescheduling games for this conversation as we both came down with COVID and various other ails and priorities at different times. So I'm glad that we are here today. The universe has said this is the day that you and I were designed to meet.
Right.
So as I warned you, Lee, I start every episode with the same question. It's your origin story. So when you were a wee lad, what was it that you dreamed of being as a grown-up?
Sure. As absurd as this was, and I was relatively short. I'm still short, but I was very short for my age when I was a kid. But I grew up in LA. I idolized the Lakers, and all I wanted to do was be a professional basketball player and play for the Lakers. So I played basketball. I would come home, do my homework, and I played 2 to 3 hours literally every day on my driveway, 7 days a week for 8 or 9 years, because all I wanted to do was be a Laker. Now, having hit 5'9" and stopped growing, and all my peers were bigger, stronger, faster, could jump higher, could do everything better than I could, my basketball career was quite short-lived, and I never made it to the Lakers. But
not yet, maybe. But at 5'9", I mean, I realize
I'm rounding up.
You're rounding up.
I'm rounding up to 5'9", so it's probably closer to 5'8.5".
Okay, fair enough. But there are some folks who play professionally who aren't over 6 foot or even 7 foot tall. So there may be a place for you yet. Keep up. Do you still practice 3 hours a day?
I wish. No, I do not.
If only. All right. So if it wasn't to be a sporting career playing for the Lakers, help me understand what brought you into the tech industry and the product and product development career that you've had.
Sure. So I've always liked the business side. When I was a kid, I used to open up the newspaper and look at stock quotes, even though I had I just liked business. I liked reading the Wall Street Journal. I was kind of a nerd. So I went through finance in undergrad, and I started my career at Intel in the finance department. And that kind of was a springboard of my career in tech. From Intel, I went to other smaller software companies, and I spent a bunch of time at HP. And so I got into, from finance, I transitioned more to marketing, from marketing more towards the product side. So then I did decades of product management and business development and partnerships. So I've been in high tech literally since graduating college in 95.
All right, Ian. Well, you're kind of in high tech now, but I just want to point out the parallels, because I spent 15 years in finance. So I was the geek and nerd with the numbers. You may be the nerd in your own words there in terms of the technology. But now your passion is people. It's the engagement, it's relationships at work, as I shared in the introduction. So what was the pivot point that moved you from purely tech focus to now tech, but with a heavy dose of human and relationship focus in there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as like a lot of people, once you progress in your career, you end up becoming a manager of other people. And I was terrible. I didn't know I was terrible, but I was a terrible manager in my first 3-4 years as a manager. I was one of those, look, I'm Gen X. I was like, you show up to work, Morag, if you work for me, here's your assignment. Let me know if you need any help. Let me know when you're done. And that was it. I didn't spend any time really helping. proactively helping. I didn't spend any time really getting to know my employees. I did everything wrong. But I didn't know that I did it wrong. So as I got better and got some training and kind of understood that this is not the way you get the most out of your people, especially in the long term, I started really getting into the psychology of management and how to become a better manager. And then even pre-COVID, I started trying to understand why employees were leaving companies and why employees stayed, right? Is it compensation? Is it communication? What is it about it? And it turns out, based on a lot of research, a lot of interviews, it was the relationships they had in the workplace, especially the relationship with their direct managers. So again, I tried to better myself, reading books and getting training and trying to, how do I build these relationships to help the employees? And so as I got better and better, I got even more interested in it. When COVID hit, right, we had the Great Resignation and companies were scrambling, and I really, really was interested in, okay, why are people leaving now? What is it about COVID that's making people leave? And for the ones that are staying, why are they staying? When all their friends and colleagues are leaving, why are they staying? And again, a lot of it had to do with relationships. And so as I progressed in my career, I wanted to get better. And I wanted to look at tools to help us get better, which I know we're going to talk about in a little bit. And that's kind of where my interests lay, more on the psychology of it and trying to understand what makes employees more engaged, what makes them stay, what makes them more productive, what companies and leaders do to help them to be more productive and more engaged.
So what is it, do you think, about this conversation that makes it such a mystery or even a surprise to far too many leaders, in my experience, given that Gallup have been researching engagement for more than 20 years? Their research consistently shows people don't leave organizations. They leave, to your point, poor managers. It comes down to the quality of our relationships, topic that you and I champion every single day. And yet, why is it, do you think, then, that it is still a mystery or a surprise to so many large organizations?
I'll answer this in a couple of ways, but I think a lot of it comes down to psychology. So one is, people know you should eat healthy and exercise. Yet, so many people eat junk food and just sit on the couch and watch TV all day or all night when they get home from work, even though they know better. So even though companies know better, there seems to be, I think there's a structural bias. I think there's a old school mentality that this is the way we've always done it. We're going to continue to do it. And there's a prioritization problem. I'll get on my soapbox for a little bit. I think if you look at large, and the companies we know, the Apples, the Nikes, the Amazons, the Googles of the world, large multinational companies that are making more money than some countries, their number one priority is the shareholder. Their number two priority is customer. The number three priority is the employee. And I think that's exactly backwards of how it should be. If you put the employee first, it'll take care of those other two long term, right? They'll work harder, company will be more profitable, they'll work better with customers, they'll be more focused, they'll stay in the company longer, so you won't have turnover, and everybody wins. But companies right now are structured and are incentivized to focus on the shareholder. So they make decisions like laying off huge groups of people, even though they don't have to, right? Which hurts morale, it makes for inconsistencies, it hurts customers, but it helps the share price in the short term.
So I concur, I think, in terms of we are raised in the traditional approach to business. And it's why I moved out of finance, just looking at the numbers and what the forecasts were showing to the how business gets done and the relationships that go along with it. And you mentioned there the pandemic. What impact do you see that having on the quality of our relationships at work?
I think it made it put kind of a spotlight on how important relationships are. I think you hear about this loneliness pandemic, right? Where it got exacerbated since the pandemic, right? People are just on their screens by themselves. A lot of people are now working remotely as opposed to before they were in their office. We need those relationships. Humans are social animals. We're wired to have these relationships. We have to have these. It's not an option. So for companies that emphasize these relationships and help people build relationships in the workforce, it's going to be a better work environment. They'll get better employees, better productivity, more retention. For companies that don't, you're going to have the opposite effect. So we need these relationships. And since the pandemic, it's become, there's been more of a spotlight. We have to have them. It's bad if we don't get them. I mean, you've got, just the mental side of it, right? So forget about the workplace and collaborating, just the mental side of, hey, you and I, we need work friends or people we can trust at work and people we can talk to at work, not just about work, but actually real relationships where we're building trust. We're talking about what we did on the weekend. We're talking about where we went on vacation. We're talking about our kids, what have you.
Yeah, as I listened to you there are just different books that kept popping into my mind. Ours to start with, You, Me, We, Why We All Need a Friend at Work and How to Show Up as one. But there's Stephen Covey and his At the Speed of Trust, which his research has shown that the more we know, like, and trust each other, the faster information flows, the better quality decisions we can make because trust is elevated. I know you've seen a friend of mine, Heather Younger, and her book, The Art of Caring Leadership. And so the conversation is starting to move, and that gives me hope. But that brings me to Loops then and the tool that you've designed. So tell me, how does Loops and HeyLoops, your website, enhance relationship management within teams, especially if they're working in a hybrid environment?
Yeah. So one of the things that I struggled with when I was managing people was so even if companies are employee first, they've got the right priorities, they want to encourage people to build relationships, there's really no tools to do it. I mean, how do you tell a manager, hey, here's our vision, here's our goals, and here's what we want you to do, and it's okay to build these relationships? What does a manager do now? How do they go about doing it? What tools can they? There weren't any tools. So what I wanted was a way to, how can I get to know my employees and collect that information and get reminded about information, use that information to build that connection? Because that's how you build trust. You get to know people, Morag, you told me about your kids, and then I would later on ask you about your kids and how they're doing. But if I can't remember any of that information, one, I can't really ask you about it. And two, you would feel like, oh, Lee doesn't really care about me because he doesn't even remember my husband's name, my kid's name. He doesn't remember my favorite color is blue or that I'm allergic to dairy. Why did I even waste my time telling him this stuff if he doesn't remember any of it, right? So you kind of lose trust if you don't have those tools. So Loops was built as a platform to help us to remember these things about our colleagues, our managers, our coworkers, our employees, partners, customers, whomever, and then to get reminders about it. So it can do things like, hey, it's Morag's birthday tomorrow. She likes chocolate. Maybe you should get her a box of chocolate for her birthday. Or it's a work anniversary. And we use AI. So in the future, it'll do things like, hey, Morag lives in Colorado. There's a tornado approaching her hometown. You might want to reach out to her. There's multiple touch points. Or the Denver Nuggets just acquired a star player, and she's a big Denver Nuggets fan. You should let her know. So they're using those touch points to build trust, because that's how, as a normal human, you build trust, right? As you talk about things in common, you talk about things about the other person. So long answer to make a long answer even longer is, it's a platform to help people do that, because there was no tool to actually do that. And so we launched Loops, and it's available now. It's in beta to help people to build those relationships.
It was interesting because when I got to see a little bit behind the magic curtain, and thank you for that insight. I mean, I'd gone in thinking, well, it's like a CRM. I mean, CRM, customer relationship management platform. Isn't it the same? But in fact, it is very different, because as you look at a CRM, what is it designed to do? It's designed to show value moving through a sales process. It is all about the deal. It is not about the contact that you have at the client organization and the conversations that you're having. And that was the aha for me as I looked at Loops, in that it's all of those other little pieces of information that birthdays. Okay, I might have those available to me in my contacts, and another platform, LinkedIn, might remind me of work anniversaries, but there isn't anywhere for me to conveniently house the other nuggets that you choose to share with me that brings us closer together. So what has been most surprising for you as you've moved from being part of big tech organizations to now this entrepreneurial role where you're designing this new product from the ground up? What role have relationships played for you in bringing Loops to the world?
Yeah, the biggest surprise is taking something from 0 to 1 is really hard. Without having the giant company kind of behind you and hundreds of people to rely on it. It's really hard to go from 0 to 1. It's quite challenging, but luckily I've had some other folks locally here in San Diego that are helping me. Great beta customers at both large and small companies giving me feedback. So it's been good using those relationships. And then I've personally used Loops myself. I use it every day, just a couple minutes a day to update stuff, and it gives me a reminder. So it's great for me. And just watching people tell me, hey, I used to use Post-it notes and write stuff down. Now it's all categorized. This just makes it much easier. Or I used to use Google Docs for this stuff, and it was a mess, just a complete mess. So just hearing that feedback of, oh, you've saved me X amount of time, or, oh, this is so easy. I just use my phone and it's really quick. So that's been really nice to get that feedback.
It's interesting, isn't it, how quickly we can go from what feels like a systematic approach, but suddenly recognizing that it is somewhat chaotic and disorganized, to having this central point of contact. So this brings me back to communication, because the tool is only as good as the data we choose to put into it, but it also is only as effective as the actions that we choose to take with what it reminds us of. So give me some examples of, what role does communication play in building and maintaining strong workplace relationships?
Right. Obviously, if there's no communication, you can't build trust. To me, it's all about trust. So if you're not communicating with your employees beyond, hey, Morag, project X needs to be done by Friday, you don't have a relationship there. So there has to be communication. That two-way communication with the leader or manager, I think, should be kind of the primary person leading that communication, at least initially, until the employee feels comfortable. And not that the manager should be a therapist, but treat the employee less like a number and more like a human, right? Remember, they're human first, as opposed to employee 1356, right? So treat them right, get to know them, let them get to know you a little bit, and build from there. But you have to communicate, whether that's on email, Slack, phone calls, video calls, what have you. Obviously, it's much easier in person, but so many companies are hybrid or remote. But with technology, there's no reason to not have strong, worthy communication with your colleagues and employees.
You mentioned earlier a few of your beta testers and your own personal experience of moving from the Google Sheets or the Post-it notes into something a little bit more systematic. Is it too soon for you to be able to share some examples of how it's made a difference for the quality of relationships within a team or within an organization?
Sure, I can give you a great example. My wife, she's a public defender. She has 19 lawyers working for her. And prior to Loops, she had Post-it notes across her monitor of the employee's name, spouse's name, and kids' names. As you can imagine, it was a mess, right? She had other little notes, but they were really tiny. So now she just puts in Loops, and if she knows she's got somebody coming to her office, she just gets on her phone, opens up Loops, and you can just hit the microphone button and ask, hey, what is Morag husband's name?
What's my favorite ice cream cover flavor?
Yeah,
I like it.
It does anything. As long as the data is in the system, you can just ask Loops and it'll give you an answer within a few seconds. So now, instead of having Post-it notes, she's got a clean desk and she's got all this information categorized, and she's got a lot more information because the Post-it note, there's a very limited amount of space for you to put in information.
And they always lose their sticky and fall off at the most inappropriate times. All right. So for somebody who's listening to this episode, they're going to think, yeah, but that's cheating. There's a yes, but. So what's your answer to the yes, but, or the worry that using something like Loops is cheating?
I can understand that sentiment. but people are already doing this. So if you're talking to somebody, let's say you have any system, you're going to try and use your brain to remember.
Mm-hmm.
So you're already doing it, but this is just helps you because unless you have a photographic memory, you're not going to remember what Morag's allergic to or where her favorite restaurant is or her favorite color. Maybe you'll remember 10% of it, maybe 20. So you're already trying to do it. And I was using Google Docs. Other people use Post-it notes. Other people use Microsoft OneNote. You're already doing this. This is just a much better way to do what you're already doing.
Designed and fit for purpose.
Right. And it's got the added benefit of the reminders. And in the future, again, with AI, we'll be able to give you multiple touch points, not just birthdays and anniversaries, but again, Morag's company just did a huge layoff. Reach out to her. It's literally infinite, right? There's so many things going on in the world. So, which is something you can't do with anything else, but it helps to build that trust and that connection.
I think that's an exciting opportunity because it is about celebrating those life moments. It is showing that we're being fully present and helping us to order the things that up until now we may have been trying to sort in our mind. And my mind can be like a sieve at times, or those Post-it notes. But it also is there, you just said it, if there's a layoff going on, or if I need help, a way of then tapping into my network, who are the subject matter experts that may be able to help me solve or answer this particular question. So over time, it becomes a really powerful, sticky tool that makes us ultimately better together.
Right, absolutely. You could say, like, let's say you've got hundreds of contacts. You can't remember who knows social media marketing. You could just ask the system, who knows social media marketing, and you'll get names within seconds. Who's allergic to garlic? Who's a vegetarian? Who lives in Colorado? There's no limit to the amount of questions you can have. As long as the data is there, you'll get an answer, as opposed to trying to think in your head, oh man, who do I know that lives in Colorado? Or I think Morag said she was a vegetarian. I can't remember. Let me ask her again. Even though she's told me 5 times, right? I have the embarrassment of yet again asking her. Whereas I could just ask the system and save myself that embarrassment. You've asked me, but I wanted to ask you a question. How do you feel companies should proactively encourage people to build relationships?
Well, I think that's it. It's making it part of the conversation and the skill set. And this just becomes another tool that people can choose to opt into to help manage that. And I think the biggest gap is we leave it to chance. And the whole, it's not personal, it's just business is BS, because it isn't just business that's personal, it's life that's personal. And unless we're paying attention to the quality and health of our relationships, and that doesn't mean pointing the finger and saying, well, they need to shape up, they need to go first. All we can do is look at how do we show up. And if we're the ones making those deposits into the universe and making and reaching connection, that builds a reputation of the go-to person. It builds that foundation of trust versus keeping each other at arm's length. And that slows everything and everybody down.
Right. And it hurts companies, which is I think part of like myself and yours and some other and Heather's and our maybe frustration is not the right word, but like this is so obvious to many of us, and yet companies, aren't headed in the right direction. They're not doing the right things.
Well, I think we're still stuck in that mindset. Well, this is just the way it is. Walk it off. Nothing to see here. And the reality is it may be how it is or how it's been. It doesn't need to be the way that it has to be going forward. And I know I've seen through the work that we've done here at SkyTeam and the impact of our books on this topic, where it has transformed what were either two leaders at all-out loggerheads. I've seen it transform teams who were misaligned and confused about priorities to pulling in the same direction. And I've seen it transform toxic work cultures into healthier ones. That doesn't mean they're skipping through the daisies and everything is fabulous. It means that they are better equipped to handle those tough days when there is uncertainty and stress and anxiety. They know who and how and what to call on in order to navigate that turbulence.
I agree. I may have to use some of your quotes on our website.
Feel free. We can be better together. Please do. So you talked earlier that one of the ahas for you in starting this business is that the trying to get to one when you haven't got hundreds of people on the team was challenging. So what advice would you have for leaders who are thinking of going it alone or joining a small startup and looking to use technology to build trust and deeper connections? What advice do you have?
Yeah, don't do it alone. Get whether it be co-founders or just other people to help you, advisors. Get those advice, because people have done it before. They've made the mistakes. You don't want to make the same mistakes they have. Learn from it, because it's a little lonely, to be honest, when you're working 12, 14, 15 hours a day. Without somebody to bounce ideas off of or work with you on it. And it's hard. It's hard to build something new. Iterating is much easier, but to build something brand new from scratch is really difficult. And know that going in, it is not going to be a walk in the park. It will be hard.
Mm-hmm. So where have you found your new tribe then? Who are the people that you turn to act as a sounding board, to give you that shot of team to keep you in the game and at your best?
Yeah, good question. So luckily, I've got a pretty decent network myself. So I've reached out to people who've built companies or they're in the process of building companies. I also have several people here locally in San Diego that are helping me to build Loops. So they're part of the team, and we talk pretty much 5-6 days a week. So they've been a good sound, allow me to vent frustrations, or we bounce ideas off each other and give very honest feedback, which I think is very important, to have honest feedback. And so that's helped me, is to just have a team of people locally here to support me, plus my wider network that I could reach out to, because mistakes will happen. People will let you down. Things won't happen on time. You're going to go over budget. It will happen. So you need to be able to bounce back and recalibrate and keep going.
I would applaud that. I know when I started SkyTeam 17 years ago now, but having to redefine what it meant to be part of a team. At that time, I was a solopreneur, and getting that shot of people, whether it be at a Starbucks and interacting with the barista, or whether it's from the client teams, until I grew SkyTeam and now have Eric, Ruby, and Jose, who I can lean on day to day, as well as those client friendships and relationships that I've built, and friendships and contacts that I've made with people like yourself who also care passionately about how business gets done and the quality and depth of our relationships and how our success is all independent. So how can people who are listening to this conversation learn more about you? How can they get involved in the work that you're doing at HeyLoops?
Yeah, if they go to heyloops.com, that's HeyLoops.com. They could read about what we're doing. Hopefully soon we'll have some quotes on Morag on the website, and they can click sign up. They could try it for free. No credit card required. You just need an email address and you can give it a try for free.
Excellent. Well, I encourage everybody to do it, because relationships are best left not to chance, being intentional, being present. And it's amazing. Remembering the little pieces allows us to get to the big work and the big decisions together. So Lee, thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your journey and the work that you're doing at Loops. I look forward to future conversations.
Thank you, Morag. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining Morag today. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. If you learned something worth sharing, share it. Cultivate your relationships today when you don't need anything before you need something. Be sure to follow SkyTeam and Morag on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you have any ideas about topics we should tackle, interviews we should do, or if you yourself would like to be on the show, drop us a line at info@skyteam.com. That's SKYE team.com. Thanks again for joining us today, and remember, business is personal and relationships matter. We are your allies.